everybody.
Hello.
What a great turnout. This is terrific. What a great night. I'm Kevin O'Keefe. I'm a friend of the library. The library's friends of the Brooks Library. We support programs like this and many others. Are you too interested in being a friend? Anyone? Oh, I see a lot of hands going up. Slow down, one at a time. Everyone will be served. If you're interested in learning more about the Friends, we meet on the third Wednesday of every month. In fact, we just had our meeting the other day. And we're just a group of dedicated volunteers who help out the library in any way we can. I have to say before we begin, in our meeting the other day, the rumors are true. There have been some kind of disturbed spirits in the Brooks Library recently, and somebody, a local volunteer, came in with a EMF. It's a electromagnetic something field. Is that what it is? And they did a reading, and they. Oh my God! It's Mr. James Joyce himself. Oh my God!
So good to see you. Such a good night to the Irish. And have you all come to talk about the new book?
Yes, it's true. It's true, Mr. Joyce. We're here to.
Have you all come to hear about my book?
Yep.
And have you all read my book?
Yeah.
All read all of my book. It was hard to come by for a while. But I'm glad to see you all here tonight. I invite you, kick back, put up your feet if you can find a place to do that. That's what I'll be doing. And a toast.
Well done, Mr. James Joyce. Oh my, just like that. They come and they go here. Fun things like that happen here almost every day at the library. And we're lucky to have Star Latronica, a name that is right out of the comic book, basically, as our leader here at the library. On Tuesday, there's going to be a live harpist here, the big one, not the little put it in your pocket harp, but the big angelic harp on Tuesday at 7:00. I can't remember the lady's name, but it's Rachel Esposito, or I'm just making that up. But she'll be here 7:00 on Tuesday. And tonight we have John Mack doing a Bloomsday program, and we'll get right on it. Thank you, John.
What better place to celebrate the 118th anniversary of a single day, a very long day, a fictional day in 1904. Bloomsday 1904, and this is Bloomsday 2022. So that's really exciting. It's a tradition from New Zealand to Symphony Space in New York to Dublin, of course, that's pretty much taken over by Bloomsday. And that by now, they're probably, those who are still awake enough from all they've consumed are probably about heading to bed at being, 3 a.m. in Ireland today, right now. It's really one of those amazing pieces of world literature. Ulysses is a work that has amazed, amused, infuriated, frustrated readers for more than a century. Whatever your past experiences with Ulysses, I hope you'll enjoy this journey through his amazing work. We'll do what most celebrations, Bloomsday celebrations, do. We'll hear excerpts from the work itself. Only in this case, the excerpts, what I've tried to put together is a video that combines the excerpts with views of Dublin, with illustrations. There's, I think if you saw in the pre-show, there are illustrators who've been doing this work for decades, and some who have been doing it, barely been on the planet for decades, who are nevertheless addicted to drawing images of scenes from Ulysses. And the goal of these people, as is the goal of this presentation, is to make Ulysses more approachable to everybody and to let people, whether they've tried and struggled with it or succeeded and know it 10 times better than I do, to appreciate some of the aspects of this such a multifaceted work. So tonight we'll hear a lot of James Joyce's words and only a few of mine. I do have a few things to say, but not a huge amount. I want to let you hear mostly James Joyce's words. We have some of the people who are involved in doing the readings that are the backbone of this presentation here with us tonight, and I'd just like to give a little shout out to them. We have David Roberts, and you will see him, you might not recognize him. He doesn't have the mask on in the video. We have Ron Boslin is here. We have Jenny Holland. We have Terry, what is your last name, Terry? Carter, here with us. Who else? Who have I forgotten? And Bauman Madavi. And Bauman was particularly, I have to shout out particularly, because he was brave enough to take on Leopold Bloom and read the entire book in a day, and then did a long day, 27, 30 hours it takes to read it aloud. But Bauman took on this role, which is a very challenging one, and did a masterful job, and I hope you enjoy his performance as you'll see it on the tape. Mostly the readers you'll see just little flashes of, because primarily what you'll see are the illustrations and how people have conceived of it. And John Ogorzalek, who I didn't think would be with us, but is. I thought you were going to be out camping, but you know, camping doesn't compare to James Joyce. In celebrating Joyce, you know, we celebrate the word, because it's the power of words to enlighten, to amaze, to unnerve, to bring to life other minds, not our own, you know, other ideas, other worlds, and to amuse. I think people get intimidated when they hear the word Ulysses. Anybody can read it. I mean, well, not anybody. You have to read English. That is hard to do it without that. And I can't imagine a translation of Ulysses. That would really be a challenge. But anyone can read it. It's not, you don't have to be an academic. You don't have to be a genius or anything like that, as I am definitely living proof, since I am neither an academic nor an Ulysses genius. I'm just somebody who has really thoroughly enjoyed my time reading the book. And I hope I'll bring some of that fervor for this piece of work to this presentation. Some people call Ulysses a surrealistic. And so in my little introduction, I think the one thing I would like to emphasize is that Ulysses is in some sections definitely fantastic and surrealistic, truly. But at its core, it is realistic. It is about how people really are, what they feel, what they do, how they act, and how other people see them. So I like to think of it as kind of like a cubist painting, because we see the person from inside and from outside. We see them as they see themselves. We see them as other people see them. And I think you'll get a flavor for that in our presentation. And what better place to celebrate Ulysses than a public library? I mean, here is a book that probably, many, I shouldn't say most, I don't know, I haven't counted, but many of the of the surveys of the greatest literature of the 20th century will say that Ulysses is right up there at the top. And so here is this work that is really quite remarkable, but it was banned in the United States by the US government, by a court decision that it was obscene. And I'll explain a little later exactly what they ruled was obscene, but was considered, therefore banned. And it was not till 1933 when I would say, courageous judge, Judge Woolsey, issued this really landmark decision saying it was, as he put it, was neither obscene nor incomprehensible, which was what the other thing was. It was well, if it was incomprehensible, how did you know it was obscene? But I guess if you're thinking that way, you could. Okay. And I want to just take one moment to just really thank, has Star come back amongst our populace here? But, well, I'll thank her. There you are there. There she is. What happened to James? He wafted away. Well, I want to thank you so much for encouraging this and letting it happen and making it happen. And it's just a delight to have the opportunity. So like I said, not an expert, I'm an enthusiast. I've really enjoyed my reading of Joyce. And I think, it's like, I've enjoyed it and you will too. And you better. David can tell us, and maybe a little bit later, what miserable experience with Joyce is. Many people have had miserable experiences, as in David explained to me where a teacher said, okay, you got to read it in the next 5 weeks, and then at the end of the 5 weeks, there's going to be an exam, and you're going to have to show you understand it. It's like, well, no one really, unless they're very presumptuous, says, I understand Ulysses. Well, a little, maybe, but a lot, it takes an awful lot. So 5 weeks, that's just a way to end up hating Ulysses, I think. So this is a book that, and I was going to get to suggestions later, but I'll start with my number one suggestion, which is, if you do take on Ulysses, read slowly. I'm blessed with slow reading skills, meaning I tend to read things that normal people read fast. I read slow. I just read slow. And in this case, it's an advantage because you really need to take your time through it, or you'll just be frustrated and say, why do people like this? Virginia Woolf read the first 200 pages. They were a little bit Woolf and, no, I don't know, competitors, but they both started stream of consciousness writing, the two of them. And Virginia Woolf said she read the first two, or is reputed to say, maybe she didn't ever say it, somebody made it up. But she read the first 200 pages and found it the most boring book she'd ever read. And she gave up. She should have read a little further. There were some really good parts she missed. But it's not an easy book. And my goal is to make it a little bit more approachable to people who've never really had an opportunity to know it. And I hope to say things that people who have had an opportunity and understand it yet better than I do won't be too other than amused by our little exegesis on Ulysses. Is that a word, exegesis? What's the plural of exegesis? Who knows? James would know. James? No. Okay. So I think the other thing that I would say right off is that Ulysses is funny. If you have some knowledge, some understanding of what's going on. It is a comic novel. And I think a lot of people miss the humor, and this idea that of adding the illustrations that people made give you a little bit of sense of the range of exploration one can do in a humorous direction. It's not just a heavy book. It is a heavy book. I mean, you want to see a heavy book? Take this one. This to me, I imagine, sits on, lots of fancy people's coffee table. It's a great, trying to read Ulysses this way would kill you, but it has some great illustrations. Bauman, could you just hold up my wretched copy there and what's left of it? Don't lose any of the pages, because Penelope's speech at the end is completely falling apart. Not from overuse. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. But it's really, the physical book is very nice gives a lot of comfort. Just like I'm holding onto this podium, like it's going to hold me up. Sorry if I rattle too much. Anyway, I also do want to just explain a little bit about where the meat of the videos that you'll see, the extracts that you'll see come from. A lot of the footage, the actual voices that you hear were all done in a Bloomsday celebration we had 2 years ago. It was designed to be a celebration at the Hooker Dunham Theater, and then we had this little thing called the pandemic, and that was the end of that idea. So once we realized that that was not possible, what did we do? Did we say, no, we're not going to do it? No, we said we're going to do it on Zoom. So we actually attempted, I'd say attempted is probably the accurate word, to do a production of reading of Ulysses on Zoom, and that had its challenges, shall we say. It definitely did, for all of us, believe me. And never mind, I won't go into the details, it was too bloody. But it was really challenging, but we got something out of it, and I think the actors who did it from beginning to end, the troupe, were great in terms of taking it on and really did some marvelous work. So I'll have little cameos of each person who was in it. I've tried to capture a moment when the Zoom video wasn't like, I can't watch that, and put it in a context that makes it more interesting. And they did a marvelous job, and they deserve tremendous credit for the effort. Maybe next year we'll do it live again. That's the hope. Maybe we'll come post-pandemic will happen, and this already we're here. This is so exciting that we are here in person. I'm just delighted. So beyond what I would call rescuing the footage from that show that was usable, I also reached out. I would look online for what existed, and it's like, there's all this wonderful illustration. These people now, I mean, this isn't necessary, they didn't do it in 1904. People illustrating it who are, some of them were working their brains out just now for the last few months, really, getting ready for Bloomsday. And they were willing to give me their illustrations to use the rights to use it in the video, which is fantastic. And even a couple of foundations kicked in with the rights saying, yes, it was okay if I used this footage. Anthony Burgess, the guy who wrote Clockwork Orange, he created a 52 deck of cards, each one illustrating a scene from Ulysses. And we have a couple of them in the video. But the three that were most instrumental in terms of putting this together were Rob Barry, Jake Trunk, and Dermot O'Connor, who are current illustrators and doing some really fantastic work, so kind of working their way through the novel. It's very challenging to get through the whole thing, and in terms of imagine not just reading it, but illustrating it. And there was one man, we'll see his work, Richard Hamilton, whose life work was trying to do that. And he did posthumously have a very nice exhibit at the British Museum, and brilliant work, but he never completed his goal of illustrating the whole book. It's challenging. So, let's move on to the book. The one thing that I think, apart from realizing that it may be funny and not necessarily grim, serious, and you don't have to read it with a scowl on your face, but with a look for where the humor lies, the Odyssey is a lot about not only an understanding of the connection to the Odyssey, I should say, and with the title, it is certainly a big clue that that's what we're looking for here. It's weird to see yourself a couple seconds beyond, isn't it? And anyway, the Odyssey provides a kind of interesting context, and in many ways a humorous context, and I'll try to give you a little flavor of that as we go through the book. I think it really helps you to understand. Joyce actually, when he gave friends a copy to read, he gave them a little chart so they could know what they were follow along and know what was going on. The rest of us, we don't even get chapter headings, and by the time we get to the end with Penelope's wonderful, or Molly Bloom's really, speech at the end of the book, there's no punctuation at all. There are 4 paragraphs for 48 pages or something like that, and that's all you get. No periods, commas, anything. And the woman who reads it, Adrian Major, in the video, you'll see you can tell what the person is thinking without the punctuation. He was sparse with it, and it kind of has its own appeal. All right, the first thing to say then about the Odyssey is it is, of course, a heroic tale. And by the way, it's an easy read if you haven't read it. I hadn't read it the first time I read Ulysses. And when I did read it, I was like, oh, I can read this. This isn't ancient Greek to me. It's pretty straightforward. And it really adds a wonderful dimension. But the first thing we realize as soon as we meet Leopold Bloom is we realize this is no Greek hero. This is really a ordinary human being with warts, some of them pretty bad warts, as we will find out in the course of this. Some real problems this man has, and his life he has some problems with. He's not had an easy life, actually. And he's definitely not some heroic figure. He's a poor schlump like you or me, trying to struggle to exist. And so we get a full picture of a human being in a funny way reflected by a comparison to a great Greek hero that we all know has survived everything, to struggle to get back home, took him 10 years. Now if it took me 10 years to get home, my wife would probably have a bit of a problem with that. She wouldn't just accept, oh yeah, you got delayed in Paramus or something, But Ulysses, and it even has a little bit of a reflection on Ulysses, on the Odyssey. Because it reminds us that Ulysses wasn't necessarily such, any actual guy who fought in the Trojan Wars, was not necessarily a nice guy. And might have done some things that were pretty non-forgivable. So you realize that Ulysses, there's one point I just to mention, and it'll come up later, but that where he goes and he's defeated this horrible Cyclops, single-eyed monster, and he's leaving the bay, and he can't resist taunting him as he's leaving, and the Cyclops throws rocks and destroys most of his crew. They all drown. And they must not have thought he was very heroic at that moment. They would have thought he was like, oh, I got the parking space. They thought they was causing trouble. So, that said, we'll take it with a little bit of humor and not all too seriously. So, our day begins. Here we are, June 16th, 1904. It was a Thursday, as it is tonight. Next year, apparently it will be on Friday. The days keep moving around. It bothers me. Can't they stay put? We first encounter not our primary protagonist, which is Leopold Bloom, but Stephen Dedalus. And he probably most resembles James Joyce himself. He is the hero that, if you read the Portrait of the Artist as a young man, that's Stephen Dedalus is the artist. But here, as you read it, you really wonder, is this guy going to make it or not? There's no sense of guarantee that this man will become a great writer famed around the world. It's more a sense of he's lucky if he has a place to stay at the end of the night. In fact, he does not have a place to stay at the end of the night, as you will find as you see this. So Stephen is struggling, and he's trying to get some footage, and he's not having an easy time with his roommate, which is something probably most of us have had from time to time ourselves. So he's barely scraping through. He's teaching school children, and he's really hardly, again, the son. He represents in this the son of the hero Odysseus, Telemachus, and Telemachus is, again, heroic in his own way. It depends what you call heroic. He and Ulysses end up, his mother, Penelope, has been fending off suitors for 10 years. And then when they finally get back, they kill them all. Ulysses and his son Telemachus go out there on a little bit of a rampage, and when they're done, they don't know anybody in their region. It's like unfriending everyone, It's like frightening. Stephen's own father, Simon Daedalus, we will find is something of an alcoholic, or not something of, he is an alcoholic, and is essentially destroying the family. And so that Stephen's very much a struggling person who could use a father, not a Ulysses father, but not an Odysseus. And just in case it isn't clear to everyone, Odysseus and Ulysses are just simply named different. One's the Roman, Odysseus is the Greek. That's they are the same figure in the literature. Meanwhile, Bloom, we will find, is someone who's lost his son when he was like 11 days old. And so he is mourning that loss on this day very much, and we several times see him go back in his mind and think about the son that he lost. This is going to be a rough day for everybody, and a long one. So we have 55 minutes of video. That probably won't be that long as the days these guys went through. Okay. As the day begins, Stephen is awakened by his blustery roommate, Malachi Buck Mulligan.
Stately, plump Buck Mulligan came from the stairhead, bearing a bowl of lather on which a mirror and a razor lay crossed. A yellow dressing gown, ungirdled, was sustained gently behind him on the mild morning air. He held the bowl aloft and intoned,
Introibo ad altere Dei. Come up, Kench! Come up, you fearful Jesuit!
Solemnly, Mulligan came forward and mounted the round gun rest. He faced about him, thus gravely priced power, surrounding land and the awakening mountains. Then, catching sight of Stephen Daedalus, he bent towards him and made rapid crosses in the air, gurgling in his throat and shaking his head.
Back to barracks! For this so dearly beloved is the genuine Christine, body and soul and blood and owns. Slow music, please. Shut your eyes, gents. One moment, a little trouble about those white corpuscles. Silence all.
He skipped off the gun rest and looked bravely at his watcher, gathering about his legs the loose folds of his gown. The plump, shadowed face and sullen, oval jowl recalled a prelate, patron of the arts in the Middle Ages.
The mockery of it. Your absurd name in ancient Greek.
Stephen Daedalus stepped up, followed him wearily halfway and sat down, watching him still as he propped his mirror.
My name is absurd too. Malachi Mulligan. 2 dactyls. But it has a Hellenic ring, hasn't it? Tripping and sunny, like the Buck himself. We must go to Athens. Will you come if I can get the aunt to fork out 20 quid? What is it? Cough it up. I'm quite frank with you. What have you against me now?
They halted, looking towards the blunt cape of grey head that lay on the water, like the snout of a sleeping whale. Stephen freed his arm quietly.
You wish me to tell you?
Yes, what is it? I don't remember anything.
He looked in Stephen's face as he spoke. A light wind passed his brow, fanning softly his fair, uncombed hair, and stirring silver points of anxiety in his eyes. Stephen, depressed by his own voice, said,
Do you remember that first day I went to your house after my mother's death?
What? Where? I can't remember anything. I remember only ideas and sensations. Why? What happened in the name of God?
Well, you were making tea, and I went across the land to get more hot water. Your mother and some visitor came out of the drawing room, and she asked you who was in your room.
Yes? What did I say? I forget.
You said, "Oh, it's only Daedalus, whose mother is beastly dead."
Did I say that? Well, what harm is that? And what is death? Your mother's or yours or my own? You saw only your mother die. I see them pop off every day in the Mater and Richmond and cut up into tripes in the dissecting room. It's a beastly thing and nothing else. It simply doesn't matter. You wouldn't kneel down to pray for your mother on her deathbed when she asked you. Why? Because you have the cursed Jesuit strain in you, only it's injected the wrong way. To me, it's all a mockery and beastly. Her cerebral lobes are not functioning. Humor her till it's over. You cross her last wish in death, and yet you sulk with me because I don't whinge like some hired mute from Lalouette's. Absurd.
Stephen, shielding the gaping wounds which the words had left in his heart, said very coldly,
I am not thinking about the offense to me mother,
Of what, then?
of the offense to me.
Oh, an impossible person.
When they part, what Mulligan does is says to Stephen, look, I need the key you have to this Martello Tower, which is where they stay. And I need the key to put on to press down some laundry. In other words, he's kicking him out of, and he's now has no place to stay. So Stephen is cut adrift at the beginning of the thing. Now we come to the next scene where we see Stephen walking alone on a beach, not the same beach. That was Sandy Cove. This is Sandy Mount Strand that he now walks upon.
a cloud begins to cover the sun slowly, wholly, shadowing the bay in deeper green. It lays beneath him, a bowl of bitter waters.
Her door was open. She wanted to hear my music. Silent with awe and pity, I went to her bedside. She was crying in her wretched bed for those words, Stephen, love's bitter mystery. Where now? Her secrets, old feather fans, tasseled dance cards powdered with musk, a gaud of amber beads in her locked drawer, a birdcage hung in the sunny window of her house when she was a girl. She heard old Joyce sing in the pantomime a Turco the Terrible and laughed with the others when he sang, I am the boy that can enjoy visibility.
Memories beset his brooding brain. Her glass of water from the kitchen tap when she had approached the sacrament. A cored apple filled with brown sugar, roasting for her at the hob on a dark autumn evening. Her shapely fingernails reddened by the blood of squashed lice from the children's shirts. In a dream, silently, she had come to him, her wasted body within its loose grave clothes, giving off an odor of wax and rosewood. Her breath bent over him with mute, secret words, a faint odor of wetted ashes.
Her glazing eyes staring at a death to shake and bend my soul on me alone. The ghost candle to light her agony, ghostly light on that tortured face. Her hoarse, loud breath rattling in horror while all prayed on their knees, and her eyes to strike me down. That fool, pure corpses. Oh, mother, let me be, let me live. Ineluctable modality of the visible. At least that is no more. Thought through my eyes. Signatures of all things that I'm here to read. Sea spawn and sea rat. The nearer the tide, that rusty boot. Snot green, blue silver, rust, colored signs. If you can put your 5 fingers through it, it's a gate. If not, a door. Now, shut your eyes and see.
As Stephen walked on the beach, he closed his eyes to hear his boots crush crackling wrack and shells.
You are walking through it, howsoever. I am, a stride at a time, a very short space of time through very short times of space. That is the ineluctable modality of the audible. And open your eyes. No. Jesus, if I fell over a cliff that Beatles or his base fell through the Nebeneinländer in I'm getting along nicely in the park. My ash sword hangs at my side. Well, tap what did they do? Sounds solid. Am I walking into eternity along Sandy Mount Strand? Crush, crack, crick, crick, wild sea money. Out here comes to Sandy Mount, Madeline the Mare. Rhythm begins, you see. Oh, I hear a catalectic tetrameter of ions marching. No, a gallop. Open your eyes now. I will. One moment. Has all vanished since? If I open and am forever in the black diaphania, basta, I will see if I can see. See now? It's there all the time. Yeah. Never shall be. World without end.
And the poetry of Joyce is just so lovely. I mean, sometimes you know what he's talking about exactly, sometimes you don't, but you always, the rhythm and poetry of it is always there. So they walk along the shore, so to speak, and we see the rhythm that they have as they go, and now we will begin to meet Leopold Bloom and Molly. It's often been said, by the way, in terms of music, that Dublin is an extremely musical city, and it certainly was in 1904, where people routinely would get together at the Ormond Hotel and sing wonderful songs, somewhat beer-fueled, I'd say, but they certainly enjoyed themselves thoroughly. And some apparently sang quite remarkably beautifully. So here we have Dan DeWalt's piano is the music that accompanies the video that you're seeing, and I think it captures a lot of that spirit. Leopold Bloom has a long day ahead of him, long in its own way as Ulysses' journey. Ulysses' home is filled with his wife's suitors, and Bloom's is soon to be filled with one particular suitor, or not exactly a suitor, exactly, as you will see, a theatrical promoter. His name is Blazes Boylan, who's offering Bloom's wife, Molly, a lead singing role in his latest musical tour. Boylan has sent her a letter which Bloom has seen. He's seen the envelope. He hasn't seen what's inside it, but what he's seen is that Molly immediately hid it under her pillow. So he has a strong sense that Boylan's meeting with Molly is not just about arranging the tour, but that he has other intents. And we will see how that develops through the course of the day. But definitely that is Bloom's conclusion immediately. So we find Bloom, or Leopold Bloom, or simply Bloom, as everyone in the novel calls him, making his breakfast for his wife, Molly.
Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. He liked thick giblet soup and nutty gizzards, a stuffed roast heart, liver slices fried with crust crumbs, fried hen cocks roes, and most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate a tang of faintly scented urine. Kidneys were in his mind as he moved about the kitchen softly, writing her breakfast things on the humpy tray. Gelid light and air were in the kitchen, but out of doors, gentle summer morning everywhere. Made him feel a bit peckish.
Another slice of bread and butter. 3, 4, right. She didn't like her plate full. Right.
He turned from the tray, lifted the kettle off the hob, and set it sideways on the fire. It sat there dull and squat. Its spout stuck out.
Cup of tea soon. Good. Mouth dry. Here you are. Just how she stalks over my writing table. Purr, scratch my head. Purr, milk for the pussins. They call them stupid. They understand what we say better than we understand them. She understands all she wants to. Vindictive, too. Cruel. Her nature. Curious mice never squeal. Seem to like it. Wonder what I look like to her. Height of a tower? No, she can jump with me. Afraid of the chickens, is she? Afraid of the choop-choops? I never saw such a stupid pussin as the pussins.
On quietly creaking boots, he went up the staircase to the hall, paused by the bedroom door.
I'm going round the corner. Be back in a minute.
No, she didn't want anything. He heard then a warm, heavy sigh, softer as she turned over and the loose brass quoits of the bedstead jingled.
So now you've met Leopold, and you can see he's about to go out and buy some kidneys, and a little later he buys some more meat, of innards, and puts them in his pocket. So dogs start coming up and sniffing his pockets. That's, So I don't know if this is really your Greek hero that we're seeing here. And I think that again, the parallel is more humorous than epic, more comic than epic. Constantly thwarted on his journey home, Ulysses of Homer's Odyssey alights on an island of people who eat lotus flowers and then fall into a deep trance. Despite Ulysses' warning, his crew eats the lotus flower and they forget that they're trying to get home. So eventually, Ulysses steels himself against the seductive wiles of the lotus flower. Bloom, on the other hand, and he gets his crew up and they get on with their journey. Bloom's taking the opposite tack. He has a correspondence with a person who calls himself. I mean, he doesn't really know who this person is any more than they know who he is. But this person calls themselves Miss Martha Clifford. And we see Bloom, we'll see him in this next episode, collecting a letter that Martha has sent him. We'll first hear the letter, and then we'll see it. And she's attached a flower to it. So from the intoxication of his kind of sneaky, quote, romance, unquote, we'll see Bloom and get a taste as he goes to a funeral for a friend of pretty much all the folks in this Dublin beer drinking society. He's really something of an outsider, and we begin to get a taste of that, not just something of, you'll see in many ways that what an outsider he is. We begin to get a taste of that in the episode that follows the sequence of the letter, as we see Bloom going to the funeral of Paddy Dignam. So that's our next episode that we will see here.
Dear Henry, I got your last letter to me and thank you very much for it. I'm sorry you did not like my last letter. Why did you enclose the stamps? I'm awfully angry with you. I do wish that I could punish you for that. I called you naughty boy because I do not like that other word. Please tell me, what is the real meaning of that word? Are you not happy in your home, you poor little naughty boy? I do wish I could do something for you. Please tell me what you think of poor me. I often think of the beautiful name you have. Oh, dear Henry, when will we meet? I think of you so often, you have no idea. I've never felt myself so drawn to a man as you. I feel so bad about that. Please write me a long letter and tell me more. Remember, if you do not, I will punish you. So now you know what I will do to you, you naughty boy, if you do not write. Oh, how I long to meet you, Henry dear. Do not deny my request before my patience are exhausted. Then I will tell you all. Goodbye now, naughty darling. I have such a bad headache today, and write by return to your longing, Martha. Oh, do tell me, what kind of perfume does your wife use? I want to know.
He tore the flower gravely from its pinhold, smelt its almost no smell, and placed it in his heart pocket.
Man with your flowers.
Hades. As Homer's hero must cross 4 rivers to reach Hades, the land of the dead, Bloom and his fellow mourners enter carriages and cross 4 rivers to bring them to Daddy Dignam's burial rites in Glasnevin Cemetery.
Martin Cunningham first poked his silk-hatted head into the creaking carriage and, entering deftly, seated himself. Mr. Lenehan stepped in after him, curving his height with care.
Come on, Simon. Are we all here now?
Come along, Bloom.
Mr. Bloom entered and sat in the vacant place. He pulled the door to after him. He looked seriously from the open carriage window at the lowered blinds of the avenue, one dragged aside.
An old woman peeping. Extraordinary the interest they take in a corpse. Glad to see a skull who give them so much trouble coming. Never know who will touch you dead. Wash and shampoo. I believe they clip the nails and the hair. Keep a bit in an envelope. Grows all the same after.
As they make their way to the cemetery, one of the men in the carriage with Bloom has spoken an incident of a man jumping into the Liffey River. Martin Cunningham reproaches him. He whispers,
I was in mortal agony with you talking of suicide before Bloom. His father poisoned himself at the Queen's Hotel at Innis.
And in the next episode, this is patterned after the episode in the Odyssey called Aeolus, or I can't pronounce it correctly, but something like that, who is the god of the winds. And both the Greek hero and Leopold Bloom are blown hither and thither. This is the second time that Stephen and Bloom will pass each other. They passed each other when they were in the funeral cortege. We didn't see the extract of that, but they passed out, and the father was in the carriage and said, oh, there's my son, made some disparaging remark about his son. So we've seen Bloom come close, and as the novel proceeds, his relationship with Stephen becomes more and more the core of what we're witnessing, apart from the other core, which is what's going on with Molly and her relationship with Blazes Boylan. But don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. Both Stephen and Bloom are at a newspaper office, and that's why they're together. Stephen has essentially a demeaning kind of task. His schoolmaster, the person he works for and is paid a pittance by, wants him to get a letter to the editor placed in the newspaper, ranting really, about mad cow disease. And so Stephen is doing his duty to try to be on the good side of his schoolmaster. And meanwhile, Bloom is also in a bit of a pickle. He's caught, he's an ad canvasser. He sells ads, and the person he's selling the ad to is interested in the ad, but pretty much at no money, and the publisher is not going to take the ad unless he gets a 3-month renewal. So Bloom's stuck and he gets nowhere, essentially. Stephen might have had a little better luck, but Bloom definitely does not. The chapter, it's interesting, Joyce plays with the style of every chapter. Each chapter has its own particular style. This one's written, it's out of a newspaper office, and it's written as though it were a newspaper. Everything, you have the headlines in bold across each section. So then after that, which is where we'll pick up in terms of the extracts, is a chapter called Lestrygonians. And we'll see that as Bloom leaves the newspaper and looks for a place to have some lunch. And we'll get a much more clear idea of Bloom's relation with his fellow Dubliners through this episode.
Lestrygonians. It is now 1 p.m. Time for eating. In the Odyssey, Ulysses alights on the island of the Lestrygonians. Unfortunately for Ulysses and his crew, the Lestrygonians are cannibals, and most of the crew become their feast.
From Butler's Monument House corner, he glanced along Bachelor's Walk, Duke Street.
Here we are. Must eat. The Burton. Feel better then.
He pushed in the door.
Pungent meat juice, slush of greens, see the animals feed. Men, men, men.
Perched on high stools by the bar, hats shoved back. At the tables, calling for more bread, no charge. Swilling, wolfing gobfuls of sloppy food, their eyes bulging, wiping wetted mustaches. A pallid, suet-faced young man polished his tumbler, knife, fork, and spoon with his napkin.
New set of microbes, no teeth to chew it. Chomp chop from the grill, bolting to get it over. Sad boozer's eyes. Am I like that? See ourselves as others see us. Smells of men, spat on sawdust, Swedish, warmish cigarette smoke, reek of plug, spilt beer, men's beery piss, the stale of ferment. Couldn't eat a morsel of beer. Get a light snack at Davy Burns. Keep on going. Had a good breakfast. Every fellow for his own, tooth and nail. Go, grub, go, stuff.
He came out into clearer air and turned back towards Grafton Street.
Eat or be eaten. Kill, kill.
Bloom looks on. He thinks of the year his only son, Rudy, who died a few days after his birth.
We were in Lombard Street West 10 years ago, 94. Rudy died. Yep, that's right. Happier then. Snug little room that was. Swish and soft flop her stays made on the bed. Always warm from her, always liked to let herself out. Sitting there after till near 2, taking out her hairpins. Stream of life. Happy. That was the night. Was I happier then? Or was that I? Or am I now I? 28 I was. She 23. When we left Lombard Street West, something changed. Never could like it again after Ruby died. Can't bring back time like holding water in your hand. Would you go back to then? Are you not, you poor little naughty boy? Want to sew on buttons for me? I must answer.
Bloom lunches at Davy Burns and muses about his first kisses with Molly.
Throwing wine on my palate, lingered, swallowed. My sense moistened, remembered Hidden under wild ferns on how below us they sleeping. Sky, no sound, the sky. Pillowed on my coat, she had her hair, oh wonder, cool, soft with ointments. Her hand touched me, caressed. Her eyes upon me did not turn away. Ravished over her I lay, full lips full open, kissed her mouth. Yum! Softly she gave me in my mouth the sea cake, warm and chewed. Joy, I ate it, joy! Young life, her lips that gave me pouting, soft, warm, sticky, gum jelly lips. Flowers her eyes were, take me, willing eyes. She lay still, no one. High on Ben House rhododendrons, a nanny goat walking sure-footed. Screened under ferns, she laughed, warm folded. Wildly I lay on her, kissed her, eyes, her lips, her stretched neck, beating, women's breasts full in her blouse of nun's veiling, fat nipples upright. Hot! I tongued her. She kissed me. I was kissed. All yielding, she tossed my hair. Kissed. She kissed me. Me. And me now.
It gets me a little bit when he says me and me now. You know, that was then, this is now. So we go on with Bloomsday. As he leaves the bar, he sees blazes boiling again. So he keeps seeing this man who is the last man on earth that he wants to see. He scurries into the National Library to avoid running into him. And elsewhere in the library, Stephen must navigate between the mythical, in the Odyssey, Ulysses must navigate between the mythical sea monsters Scylla and Charybdis. And Stephen is trying to navigate between the literati of his time in a room of the National Library where they sit and discuss more or less everything. And he's defending this insanely complicated theory that Shakespeare himself was really Hamlet's ghost, and the son was really the father, and it's insane. I did at one time understand the sequence, but it's like, really? And finally, at the end of this whole long thing, Malachi Buck Mulligan comes in and poo-poos it, and he's like, and then later one of the literati says to him, do you believe your own theory? He says, no. So he's kind of just making it up. But he's trying to get some attention. Meanwhile, we go on to the Wandering Rocks. Now, the Wandering Rocks in the Odyssey are these rocks that move around and destroy ships. And so they're rather frightening. And for our Ulysses, that is for Bloom, it's his fellow Dubliners that he has to deal with.
The Very Reverend John Conmy, S.J., walks and greets in turn a one-legged sailor, Mrs. Shee, wife of Mr. David, M.P., 3 little schoolboys at the corner of Mountjoy Square, Mr. Dennis J. McGinney, professor of dancing, etc., in silk hat, slate frock coat with silk facings, white kerchief tie, tight lavender trousers, canary gloves, and pointed patent boots. Walking with grave deportment, most respectfully took the curbstone as he passed Lady Maxwell at the corner of Dignam's Court. Mrs. McGuinness, stately, silver-haired, Corny Kelleher, assistant undertaker, who totted figures in the day book while he chewed a blade of hay. The Reverend Nicholas Dudley, C.C. of St. Agatha's Church, North William Street. It was a peaceful day, Father Conmy observed.
McCoy and Lenehan went up the steps and under Merchant's Arch. A dark-backed figure scanned books on the hawker's cart.
There he is. Leopoldo, or the bloom is on the rye.
He's dead nuts on sales. He bought a book from an old one in Liffey Street for 2 bob. There were fine plates in it, worth double the money. The stars and the moon and the comets with long tails.
Ha! I'll tell you a damn good one about comets' tails. There was a long spread out at Glen Creek Reformatory, the annual dinner. So we had a midnight lunch, too, after all the jollification. And when we sallied forth, it was blue o'clock in the morning. Bloom and Chris Callahan were on one side of the car, and I was with the wife on the other. We started singing glues and duets, lo, the early beam of morning. She was well primed with a good load of Devil Hunt's port under her belly band. Every jolt the bloody car gave, I had her bumping up against me. Hell's delights. She has a fine pair, God bless her.
Mr. Bloom turned over idly pages of Aristotle's masterpiece. Plates, infants cuddled in a ball in blood-red wombs like livers of slaughtered cows. He glanced at Tales of the Ghetto by Leopold von Sacher-Masoch.
No, she wouldn't like that much. I got her at once, Sweets of Sin, more in her line. Let us see. All the dollar bills her husband gave her were spent in the stores on wondrous gowns and costliest frillies. For him, for Raoul. Oh, yeah, yes, this here, try. Her mouth glued on his in a luscious, voluptuous kiss. For him, for Raoul. I'll take this one.
Nearby, Stephen Dedalus watched. Stephen sees his sister Dilly.
My eyes, they say she has.
He took the coverless book from her hand, Chardonnel's French primer.
What do you buy that for? To learn French? It's all right. Hey, mind Maggie doesn't pawn it on you. Suppose all my books are gone. She is drowning. Save her. All against us. She will drown me with her eyes and hair, lank coils of seaweed hair round me, my heart, my soul, salt, green, death, misery, misery.
This next episode is the Sirens, and the siren song seduces sailors to their doom. Homer's hero has himself tied to the mast so he can hear the sirens and not be drawn astray. Bloom is way too far gone for that. He sees Boylan again and confirms his fears that Boylan is about to begin an affair with his wife, which, by the way, he is. We'll find, we don't have the extract of that here, but Molly describes it rather literally in her monologue. But also in this day in Dublin, there is music. And so we have a brief interlude, about 30 seconds actually, when we have a little bit of the fiddle playing you might hear in a Dublin town, and then we'll go tavern, and then we'll go right on to the next section, which is the Cyclops section, which is probably one of the kind of, in some ways, one of the hardest sections to take, because it's pretty painful what happens with Bloom, but a very important experience for Bloom and for our readers as well. So we'll go straight ahead and go on to hear the Sirens and then Cyclops.
Whoa, hey! Come on, Simon, give us a ditty. We heard that piano.
Oh, I couldn't, man.
Nah, go on, blast you. Get it out in bits. Go on, Simon.
Cyclops. Homer's Ulysses faces off against the one-eyed giant Cyclops, who kills most of his crew. Bloom must face his fellow Dubliners.
Oh, we turned into Barney Kiernan's, and there, sure enough, was the citizen, up in the corner, having a great confab with himself and that bloody mangy mongrel, Gary Owen. He waiting for what the sky would drop in the way of drink. So they started talking about capital punishment, and of course, Bloom comes out with the why and the wherefore, and all the codology of all the business. And the old dog, smelling him all the time, I'm told those Jewies as have a sort of queer odour coming off them for dogs about, I don't know what all, deterrent effect, and so forth and so on.
There's one thing it has a deterrent effect on.
Yeah, what's that?
The poor bugger's tool that's being hanged.
Is that so?
God's truth. I heard that from the head warder when they hanged Joe Brady, the Invincible. He told me when they cut him down after the drop, it was standing up in their faces like a poker.
Oh, that can be explained by science. It's only a natural phenomenon, don't you see? Because on account of the...
Oh, so off they started about Irish sports. And of course, Bloom had to have his say too about how violent exercise was bad. I declared to my antimacassar, if you took up a straw from the bloody floor, and if you said to Bloom, do you see that straw? That's a straw. Declare to my aunt, he'd talk about it for an hour and talk steady.
Talk turns to how Blazes Boylan spread false rumours to manipulate the odds on a boxing match, and then to his latest musical enterprise.
I hear Blazes is running a concert tour now up in the north.
Yes, that's quite true. Yes, the kind of summer tour, you see, just a holiday.
Mrs. B is the bright particular star, isn't she?
My wife? She's singing, yes. I think it will be a success, too. He's an excellent man to organize. Excellent.
Ho, ho, big ob, says I to myself, says I. Blazes doing the tootle on the flute. Concert tour. That's the bucko that'll organize her, take my tip.
Lenehan comes in, and the results of the Gold Cup course race. Based on a false rumour, he is convinced Bloom bet on the winner and sneers that Bloom is too cheap to buy a round of drinks with his winnings.
He's a bloody dark horse himself.
Where is he? Defrauding widows and orphans.
Isn't that a fact? What I was telling the citizen about Bloom and the Sinn Féin? And after all, why can't a Jew love his country like the next fellow?
Why not, when he's quite sure which country it is?
Is he a Jew, or a Gentile, or a Holy Roman, or a swaddler? Or what the hell is he? We don't want him.
He's a perverted Jew from a place in Hungary.
That's the new Messiah for Ireland.
Well, they're still waiting for their Redeemer.
Yes. And every male that's born, they think it may be their Messiah. And every Jew is in a tall state of excitement, I believe, till he knows if he's a father or a mother.
Oh, by God. You should have seen Bloom before that son of his that died was born.
Do you call that a man?
Well, there were 2 children born anyhow.
And who does he suspect?
Oh, there is many a true word spoken in jest. It'd be an act of God to take hold of a fellow the like of that and throw him in the bloody sea. Justifiable homicide.
A wolf in sheep's clothing, that's what he is. Barrage from Hungary, cursed by God.
His pockets hanging down with gold and silver. Stand us a drink itself. Devil's a sweet fear. There's a Jew for you. All for number 1. Cute as a shithouse rat. And there's Blooms leaving in a carriage and the citizen yelling after him.
3 cheers for Israel!
And the citizen bawling on his high horse about the Jews and the loafers, calling for a speech, and a loafer with a patch over his eye starts singing, if the man in the moon was a Jew, Jew, Jew.
Mendelssohn was a Jew, and Karl Marx, and Mercadante, and Spinoza, and the Savior was a Jew, and his father was a Jew. Your God.
Whose God?
Your God was a Jew. Christ was a Jew, like me.
By Jesus, I'll brain that bloody Jewman for using the holy name. By Jesus, I'll crucify him, so I will. Give us that biscuit box here.
God, the devil wouldn't stop him till he got hold of the bloody tin anyhow.
Where is he till I murder him?
and everybody paralyzed with the laughing. Begod, the citizen made a swipe and let fly. Mercy of God, the sun was in his eyes, or he'd have left him for dead. And all the populace shouting and laughing, and the old tin box clattering along the street.
The next episode is disquieting in a rather different way. We see a side of Bloom that is far less than pretty. It's written so you think you're seeing the thoughts of the young woman. And about halfway through, it starts to switch, and you begin to realize, no, these are Bloom's thoughts of what she's thinking. She's not necessarily thinking pretty much any of it. This is the way Bloom is, what he's using, to be frank, to excite himself. So this is, so our next chapter here is Nausicaa. Both Bloom and Odysseus in the Odyssey don't actually touch the young girl, but they never achieve, nevertheless, Bloom at least achieves his ends because, and this is the chapter, by the way, that was the key element of the obscenity charge. And I swear I read the whole thing when I was in college, and I had no idea of what had actually occurred. The only way it's shown is he stands up and he feels his pants are wet and says, oh, it's sticky, and you feel so enervated afterwards. It's like, oh, that's what's been going on. He's been exciting himself while watching this young girl. And then you find out, you see, she walks by and she gives him a look, and he realizes, oh, she's realized what he was doing. And he feels guilty, if that's any help, but it's not a very pleasant thing. But anyway, let's see it. We show it in this with, as it's kind of written, which is with a woman, it's her thoughts. But as I say, I think in time, and even from few hints, Joyce left saying that this chapter is about the projected image. He does say it's all in Bloom's head. So I think that's probably what's really going on here.
She gazed out toward the distant sea, and her heart went pit-a-pat.
Yes, it was her that he was looking at. There was meaning in his look. His eyes burned into her as though they would search her through and through, read her very soul. Wonderful eyes they were, but could you trust them? She could see at once by his dark eyes and his pale intellectual face that he was a foreigner. He was in deep mourning, and the story of a haunting sorrow was written on his face. He was looking up so intently, so still.
He saw her kick the ball, and perhaps he could see the bright steel buckles of her shoes if she swung them like they thoughtfully with the toes down.
There was joy in her face because she wanted him, because she felt instinctively that he was like no one else. If he had suffered, more sinned against than sinning, or even if he had himself been a sinner, a wicked man, she cared not. She just yearned to know all, to forgive all, as if she could make him fall in love with her. Then, mayhap, he would embrace her gently, crushing her soft body into him, and love her, his honest girlie.
Somehow I wonder if that's what this young woman really was thinking. Okay. Now we reach a chapter that no one can understand, called Oxen of the Sun.
And as no man knows the ubicity of his tumulus, nor to what processes we shall thereby be ushered, nor whether to Tophet or to Edenville, in the like way is all hidden when we would backward see, from what region of remoteness the whatness of our who-ness hath fetched his whenceness.
So remember that the next time you have to find out about the whatness of your who-ness and its whenceness. By the way, what that means basically is that you don't know where you don't know where you are, you don't know where you came from, and you don't know where you're going to. Fairly common human condition. Okay, now we go on to the really wild part of the book, Circe. And Circe takes place in Nighttown, which is the kind of red light district of Dublin at that time. And it's in two sections. And the first section takes place where Bloom is following Stephen. Stephen is, the passage that Jenny just read is from a scene that takes place in the kind of break room of a maternity hospital, where Bloom is there because he's waiting for trying to see how Mrs. Purefoy is doing. She's been in labor for 3 days. And some of this changing style that Jenny was referring to is that he took a different style for 9 separate styles, 9 separate ages, to kind of mimic, in a sense, the periods of gestation of 9 months. And now they're all waiting there. And with Bloom, the others are not there for her. There are the medical students who kind of hang out here. There are some hangers-on, like Stephen is kind of hanging on with Buck Mulligan, who is himself a medical student. And there are some nurses in the room. And so that's what's going on. And now they're getting progressively drunk, the men. The nurses are not, obviously, but the men are. And the men now are going off to Nighttown to go to Bella Cohen's brothel. So meanwhile, Bloom is a little worried about Stephen. Doesn't show it very overtly, but he follows Stephen. And there's a definite sense of his kind of taking a paternal interest in Stephen. And you begin to see a little bit more of the heart of Bloom. So he has his perverse side and his heart side. But we go on to Circe, and Circe is an enchantress and a magician and a goddess, and she can do a lot of things, including turning men into pigs. Of course, many of us men don't need a lot of help. But she does. She takes it kind of literally and turns them into pigs. There's a brilliant novel recently of Circe that I highly recommend, that gives you the whole chapter the whole book from the Circe's point of view instead of the traditional view. It's quite fascinating. Just to say right off, a lot of what happens now cannot be happening in the real world, as we put it, even though it's written as though it was a stage play with stage directions and everything. So here we go.
Street entrance of Nighttown, for which stretches an uncobbled tram siding set with skeleton tracks, red and green will-o'-the-wisps and danger signals, rows of grimy houses with gaping doors. A woman screams, a child wails, oaths of man roar, mutter, cease. Snakes of river fog creep slowly from drains, clefts, cesspools, arise on all sides, stagnant fumes. Bloom appears, flushed, panting, cramming bread and chocolate into a side pocket. Puffing boldly, blowing, Bloom!
Bloom's father, Viraj, long dead, appears.
I told you not go with drunken goy ever.
Yeah, I know, Papachi.
What you making down this place? Have you no soul? Are you not my dear son, Leopold, who left the house of his father and left the God of his fathers, Abraham and Jacob?
Yeah, I suppose so, Father. All that's left of him.
Baldy!
Who? At your service, Molly.
Well, Mrs. Marion, from this out, my dear man, when you speak of me. This poor little hubby cold feet from waiting so long.
Bloom breathes in deep agitation, swallowing gulps of air. Questions, hopes, things to tell her. excuse, desire, spellbound. On her feet are jeweled toe rings. Her ankles are linked by a slender fetter chain. Beside her a camel waits. Fiercely, she slaps his haunch, scolding him in Moorish.
Boldy, Boldy, you're a poor stick in the mud. Go off and see life. Go and see the wide world.
Martha, Bloom's secret correspondent, appears.
Henry Leopold? Clear my name. Breach of promise. My real name is Peggy Griffin. I'll tell my brother the Bective Rugger fallback on you, you heartless flirt.
The first watch intones, the King versus Bloom. Call the woman Driscoll.
Mary Driscoll, scullery maid.
I bear a respectable character, and was 4 months in my last place. I was in a situation, £6 a year, and I had to leave owing to his carryings on. He made a certain suggestion, but I thought more of myself, as poor as I am.
I treated you right. I gave you mementos, smart emerald garters far above your station. Incautiously, I took your part when you were accused of pilfering.
As God is looking down on me, if ever I laid a hand to them oysters. He surprised me in the rear of the premises. He held me, and I was discoloured in 4 places as a result. And he interfered twict with my clothing.
Several highly respectable Dublin ladies hold up improper letters received from Bloom.
I will, by the God above me, I'll scourge the pigeon-livered cur as long as I can stand over him. I'll flay him alive.
Here? Again, I love the danger.
Messenger of the Sacred Heart and Evening Telegraph with St. Patrick's Day supplement, containing the new addresses of all the cuckolds in Dublin.
Cuckoo, cuckoo, cuckoo.
By heaven, I am guiltless as the unsunned snow. I call on my friend, Dr. Malachi Mulligan, sex specialist, to give medical testimony on my behalf.
Dr. Bloom is bisexually abnormal. He has recently escaped from Dr. Eustace's private asylum for demented gentlemen. He is prematurely bald from self-abuse, perversely idealistic in consequence. I believe him to be more sinned against than sinning. Professor Bloom is a finished example of the new womanly man. I appeal for clemency in the name of the most sacred word our vocal organs have ever been called upon to speak. He's about to have a baby.
General commotion, women faint.
Oh, I so want to be a mother.
Bloom passes through several walls, climbs Nelson's pillar, hangs from the top ledge by his eyeballs, eats 12 dozen oysters, shells included, heals several sufferers from the king's evil, bids the tide turn back, eclipses the sun by extending his little finger. Ownerless dogs come near him and defile him. Lieutenant Myers of the Dublin Fire Brigade, by general request, sets fire to Bloom. Lamentations.
Thank heaven.
Bloom enters the brothel's parlor, where Zoe, Kitty, and Florrie are with Stephen and the medical students.
What went forth to the ends of the world to traverse not itself, God, the Son, Shakespeare, having itself traversed in reality itself, becomes that self, self which itself was ineluctably preconditioned to become.
What a learned speech, eh?
Bloom's dead father reappears.
Promiscuous nakedness is much in evidence hereabouts, eh?
Grandpapa, but...
Delage unscrews his head and holds it under his arm.
Oh, the poor little fellow. High legs. They were yellow. He was plump, fat, and heavy, brisk as a snake, but some bloody savage, to graze his white cabbage, he murdered now Flaherty's duck-loving Drake.
The door opens. Bella Cohen, horror mistress, enters.
My word, I am all of a muck sweat.
Powerful being, exuberant female. Enormously I desiderate your domination. I am exhausted, abandoned, no more young. I stand, so to speak, with an unposted letter bearing the extra regulation fee before the too late box of the General Post Office of human life.
All things end. Be mine now.
All now? I should not have parted with my talisman.
Ella raised her gown slightly, lifts to the edge of a chair a plump, buck-skinned hoof, silk-socked. Bloom, stiff-legged, aging, bends over her hoof, and with gentle fingers draws out and in her laces.
To be a shoe fitter in Mansfield was my love's young dream. Awaiting your further orders we remain, Empress.
Ella transforms into Bello, his heavy cheek chops sagging. Bloom becomes a woman.
Adorer of the adulterous rump.
Hugeness.
Dung devourer.
Magnificent.
Bow, bond slave, before the throne of your despot's glorious heels, so glistening in their proud erectness.
I promise never to disobey.
You little know what's in store for you. Cheek me, I dare you. If you tremble in anticipation of heel discipline to be inflicted in gym costume, the pliers, the bastinado, the hanging hook, you're in for it this time. Very possibly, I shall have you slaughtered and skewered in my stables, and enjoy a slice of you with crisp crackling from the baking tin, basted and baked like a sucking pig with rice and lemon or currant sauce.
Oh, monsters! Cruel one!
Oh, no more blow hot and cold. What you longed for has come to pass. Henceforth, you are unmanned and mine in earnest.
Bloom, broken, closely veiled for the sacrifice, sobs.
Oh, I have been a perfect pig.
The couple fall aside. Stephen whirls giddily. Bloom whirls back, eyes closed. He totters. He stops dead. Stephen's mother, emaciated, rises stark through the floor in leper gray with a wreath of faded orange blossoms and a torn bridal veil. Her face worn and noseless, green with grave mold, she fixes her blue-circled hollow eye sockets on Stephen and opens her toothless mouth, uttering a silent word. From the top of the tower, Buck Mulligan, in party-colored jester's dress, stands gaping at her.
She's beastly dead. The pity of it.
With the subtle smile of death's madness, Stephen's mother comes nearer, breathing upon him softly her breath of wetted ashes.
All must go through it, Stephen. You too, time will come.
They say I killed your mother. Cancer did it, not I. Destiny.
You sang that song to me. Love's bitter mystery.
Oh, tell me the word, mother, if you know now.
Who saved you the night you jumped into the train at Dalkey with Paddy Lee? Who had pity for you when you were sad among the strangers? Prayer is all powerful. Prayer for the suffering souls in the Ursuline Manual and 40 days indulgence. Repent, Stephen!
He lifts his ash plant high with both hands and smashes the chandelier.
Police!
We're now going to go to the very last segments. The first is a kind of, Stephen, what happens now is Stephen has left the run out of the place because she's called the police. And he actually runs into a policeman who knocks him down. He's laying on the ground. Bloom helps him up. and walks Stephen to Bloom's home so that Stephen can recuperate. And as they walk, they talk. So we hear their conversation. It's sort of in the form of question and answer in the Joyce prose. And from there, we'll go straight into hearing our finale, the scene called Penelope, which is the return home, and we'll see Molly Bloom deliver her closing speech.
What did the duumvirate deliberate during their itinerary?
Music, literature, Ireland, Dublin, Paris, friendship, women, prostitution, diet, the influence of gaslight and the light of art and glow lamps on the growth of adjoining heliotropic trees, exposed corporation emergency dust buckets, the Roman Catholic Church, ecclesiastical celibacy, the Irish nation, Jesuit education, careers, the study of medicine, the past day, and Stephen's collapse.
What proposal did Bloom, diambulist, father of Millie, somnambulist, make to Stephen, noctambulist?
To pass and repose the hours intervening between Thursday, proper, and Friday, normal.
Was the proposal of asylum accepted?
Promptly, inexplicably, with amicability, gratefully, it was declined.
Alone, what did Bloom feel?
The cold of interstellar space, thousands of degrees below absolute zero of Fahrenheit, centigrade, or Réaumur, the proximations of the proximate dawn. Bloom's axe.
Posited the articles of clothing on a chair, inserted his head and arms into the proper apertures of the nightshirt, and entered the bed.
How?
With circumspection, the snake spiraled springs of the mattress being old the brass quoits. Prudently, as entering a lair, or ambush of lust, or adders. Lightly, the less to disturb. Reverently, the bed of conception and of birth, of consummation of marriage, and of breach of marriage, of sleep and of death.
What did his limbs, when gradually extended, encounter?
New, clean bed linen. Additional odors. The presence of a human form. Female. Hers. The imprint of a human form. Male.
Not his. Some crumbs, some flakes of potted meat, cooked, which he removed.
If he had smiled, why would he have smiled?
To reflect that each one who enters imagines himself to be the first to enter, whereas he is always the last term of a preceding series, even if the first term of a succeeding one. Each imagining himself to be the first, last, and alone, whereas he is neither the first, nor last, nor only, nor alone, in a series originating in and repeating to infinity.
What were his reflections concerning the last member of this series and late occupant of the bed?
Reflections on his vigor, a bounder, corporal proportion, a bill sticker, commercial ability, a bester, impressionability, a boaster.
With what antagonistic sentiments were his subsequent reflections affected?
Envy, jealousy, abnegation, equanimity.
Equanimity?
As natural as any and every natural act. As not so calamitous as a cataclysmic annihilation of the planet in consequence of a collision with a dark sun. As less reprehensible than theft, highway robbery, cruelty to children and animals, obtaining money under false pretenses, usury, intelligence with the king's enemies, criminal assault, manslaughter, willful and premeditated murder.
As more than inevitable, irreparable.
What retribution, if any?
Assassination, never, as two wrongs do not make a right. Divorce, not now. Exposure by mechanical artifice, automatic bed, or individual testimony, concealed ocular witnesses, not yet.
Then?
He kissed the plump, mellow, yellow, smellow melons of her rump. On each plump, melanous hemisphere, in their mellow, yellow furrow, with obscure, prolonged, provocative, melanous osculation.
He rests. He has traveled.
Let me see if I can doze off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I often asked him, atheists, or whatever they call themselves, go and wash the cobbles off themselves first, then they go howling for a priest. And they dying. And why? Why? Because they're afraid of hell on account of their bad conscience. Oh, yes, I know them well. Who was the first person in the universe before there was anybody that made it at all? Who? That they don't know. Ha, neither do I, so there you are. They might as well try to stop the sun from rising tomorrow. The sun shines for you. He said. That day we were lying among the rhododendrons on Hoath Head, in the gray tweed suit and his straw hat. The day I got him to propose to me, yes. First I gave him that bit of seed cake out of my mouth. And it was leap year like now. Yes, 16 years ago. My God. After that long kiss, I near lost my breath. Yes. He said I was a flower of the mountain. Yes. So we are flowers. All a woman's body. Yes. That was the one true thing he said in his life. And the sun shines for you today. Yes, that was why I liked him. Because I saw he understood or felt what a woman is. And I knew I could always get around him. I gave him all the pleasure I could, leading him on until he asked me to say yes, and I wouldn't answer first, only looked out over the sea and the sky, thinking of so many things he didn't know, of Mulvey and Mr. Stanhope's, and Hester, and Father. Oh, and old Captain Groves and the sailors playing All Birds Fly and I Say Stoop and washing up dishes, they called it on the pier. And the sentry in front of the governor's house with that big thing around his white helmet, poor devil, half roasted. And the Spanish girls laughing in their shawls with their tall combs. Oh, and auctions in the morning, the Greeks and the Jews and the Arabs and the devil knows who else from all the ends of Europe, and Duke Street and the Fowl Market, all clucking outside Larby Sharon's. And the poor donkeys, slipping, half asleep, and the vague fellows in the cloaks, asleep in the shade of the steps, and the big wheels of the carts of the bulls, and the old castle, thousands of years old. Yes. And those handsome Moors, all in white, and turbans like kings, asking you to sit down in their little bit of a shop. And Rhonda, with the old windows of the posadas, 2 glancing eyes, and a lattice hid for a lover to kiss the iron. And the wine shops, half open at night, and the castanets, And the night we missed the boat at Algeciras, the watchman going about serene with his lamp. And, oh, that awful, deep down torrent, oh. And the sea crimson sometimes like fire. And the glorious sunsets, and the fig trees, and the Almeida gardens. Yes. And all the queer little streets, and the pink and blue and yellow houses, and the rose gardens, and the jessamine, and the geraniums, and the cactuses. Ah, Gibraltar as a girl, where I was a flower of the mountain. Yes. When I put a rose in my hair, like the Andalusian girls used to. Or shall I wear red? Yes. And how he kissed me under the Moorish wall, and I thought, well, as well him as another. And then I asked him with my eyes to ask again. Yes. And then he asked me, would I? Yes. To say, yes, my mountain flower. And first I put my arms around him. Yes. And drew him down to me so he could feel my breasts, all perfume. Yes. And his heart was going like mad. And yes, I said, yes, I will. Yes.
Thank you very much.